So, pardon me. I'm going to make a video, assuming I can get these things out of the way. About adding integers, and it's actually a pretty neat topic because I do it a little bit differently. Here's what you need to know. I'm going to use manipulatives, and red's negative and yellow's positive. And here are the questions I have. 5 plus 3, which you should know is 8. 5 minus 3, which you should know is 2. And then a couple of other ones. So, real quick, I'm just going to show you 5 plus 3 very quickly. So, when I have 5 plus 3, what I'm talking about is I have 5 positives and 3 positives. And obviously, 5 plus 3 is 8. And I know that seems very, very obvious. If I have 5 minus 3, that's really the same as saying I have 5 positives and 3 negatives. Well, a positive and a negative will cancel each other out, and that leaves you with just 2 positives. These 2 are left. So like I said, positives and negatives will add each other out, and that's what happens. So, let's take a look. Let me see if I can get these out of the way. Alright. The next one I had was, so we said this was 8, this was 2. What if I had a negative 5 and a positive 3? Alright? A negative 5 and a positive 3 will look like this. I need 5 negatives, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 5 negatives and 3 positives. So a negative 5 and a positive 3 looks like that. Well, once again, these 3 and these 3 go away. And so I'm left with 2 negatives, right? And so a negative 5 and a positive 3 will leave me with 2 negatives. If I had negative 5 and a negative 3, well, this should make sense now. It should start to make sense. If I had 5 negatives, as I do here, and I have 3 negatives, I have 8 negatives. And that makes sense because the positive and negatives, there aren't any positive and negatives, so they can't cancel each other out. So negative 5 and a negative 3, or negative 5 minus 3, which some people like to say, will be negative 8. And I want to make this perfectly clear. Negative 5 and a negative 3 is negative 8, and that's the same as negative 5 minus 3. Although, you can't really read that, so do this. Negative 5 and a negative 3 is negative 8. Negative 5 minus 3 is negative 8. Same difference. What if I had negative 5 take away negative 3? Alright, so listen to this. Negative 5 minus negative 3. So negative 5 take away 3 negatives. Well, if I had negative 5 and I took away 3 negatives, I'd only be left with 2 negatives. So negative 5 minus 3 negatives is 2 negatives. Now, you might be wondering, how is that possible? Well, if I start with negative 5 and I want to take away 3 negatives, I can't take away something I don't actually have. So what's the opposite of taking away 3 negatives? It'd be adding 3 positives. And now if I do that, these 3 will cancel out, and you're left with 2 negatives. So let's go back and take a look at what I just did here. If I start with negative 5, and I took away 3 of those negatives, I'd be left with negative 2. I also said negative 5 take away 3 negatives is the same as adding 3 positives, which also left me with negative 2. And now my last one is, what if I start with 5 positives, and I'm going to take away 3 negatives, alright? So I'm going to start with 5 positives, and I'm going to take away 3 negatives. and here's my 5 positives. Well, I can't take away 3 negatives because I don't have 3 negatives to take away. So what's the opposite of taking away 3 negatives? Adding 3 positives. And once I add 3 positives, I'm hoping you're going to start to realize what's happening. I'm left with positive 8. So, let's see. When I start here, I said I'm starting with 5. I'm trying to take away 3 negatives. That's impossible. So it just became, well, I can't take away 3 negatives, but I can add 3 positives, which gave me a positive 8. I'm not actually going to give you the rule on how to do this because I want you to come up with it on your own. Play with manipulatives and see what you can notice. But think about this intuitively. Here I have 5 positives. I'm taking away 3, and you're left with 2. Here I'm starting with 5 negatives. I'm adding 3, and I'm left with negative 2. Here I have 5 negatives, and I have 3 negatives, so I get more negatives. I end with negative 8. Here I'm starting with 5 negatives, and I'm taking away 3 negatives, and I end up with a negative 2. Real quick, what if I started with 3 negatives, and I want to take away 5 negatives? Can you take away 5 negatives if you only start with 3 negatives? I'm hoping that you're starting to realize that the answer is no. So if I'm starting with 3 negatives, I want to take away 5 negatives. Well, I can't do that. So what's the opposite of taking away 5 negatives? I'm hoping you're starting to realize it's adding 5 positives. Now, once again, the positives and negatives add to 0. It's called the additive inverse. And I'm left with 2 positives. So let's take a look. That's going to be the same as a negative 3 and a positive 5, which is a positive 2. Alright, that's it. Hope this was useful. If you're not sure, try it on your own. Alright, bye-bye.